The 18-year-old girl ripped the pillow away from her neck and hurled it across the hospital room with every ounce of strength she had left. The pillow slammed into the wall and dropped onto the floor. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then the attending physician sighed, folded his arms, and said the same thing he had been saying for nearly a week. "Matilda, it's just a pillow." The young woman pressed herself against the headboard, breathing hard, one hand clutching the left side of her neck. Her eyes never left the pillow lying on the floor. "It's hurting me," she whispered. Then louder, "It's hurting me every night." Most of the people in the room had already decided what was happening. The chart said anxiety. The psychiatric evaluation was pending. The symptoms were considered stress-related. Case closed. But standing quietly near the doorway was a nurse named Emma Carter. And Emma noticed something that nobody else seemed interested in seeing. A cluster of angry red marks running down the left side of Matilda's neck. Fresh, inflamed, and arranged in a pattern that didn't look random. Emma had spent years working emergency medicine. She knew what allergic reactions looked like. She knew what anxiety looked like. And this looked like neither. If you're already asking yourself what was really inside that pillow, stay with me until the very end. And while you're here, leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Because what happened next would trigger a federal investigation, expose secrets hidden inside one of Kentucky's most respected hospitals, and uncover a revenge plot that had been building for 17 years. And it all began with a frightened young woman who kept saying the same thing over and over again. "The pillow is hurting me." This is the story of Matilda Brooks, the nurse who believed her, and the terrifying truth hidden inside room. A cold rain moved softly over Lexington that night, turning the hospital windows into dark mirrors and making Riverside Regional Medical Center look less like a place of healing than a fortress waiting for secrets. Matilda Brooks had stopped screaming because screaming had not helped. It had not helped the first night when she woke with fire crawling along the left side of her neck. It had not helped the second night when she slapped at her shoulder, convinced something sharp and invisible had bitten her in the dark. It had not helped the third night when a nurse she did not know told her to breathe slowly and reminded her that panic could make the body invent pain. By the sixth night, Matilda had learned that terror did not always look dramatic. Sometimes terror was quiet. Sometimes it was an 18-year-old girl sitting upright in a hospital bed at 2:13 in the morning, knees drawn beneath a thin blanket, refusing to put her head back down because the white pillow behind her felt like an enemy pretending to be harmless. She was small for her age, with narrow shoulders, pale skin made paler by fluorescent light, and long honey-brown hair that had lost its shine after nearly a week of sweat, sleeplessness, and hospital air. Her green eyes were too large in her tired face, not because she was weak, but because fear had hollowed everything else around them. Before Riverside, before room 414, before adults in clean coats began speaking about her like she was a problem to be managed, Matilda had been a senior at a small private school outside Lexington. She had loved old movies, strawberry milkshakes, and the smell of rain on hot pavement. She had kept a notebook full of poems she never showed anyone. She had been the kind of girl who apologized when someone else stepped on her foot. Her father used to tell her that gentleness was not weakness, but in room 414 gentleness had become a cage. Every time she tried to explain what was happening, her voice came out too soft, too frightened, too easy for powerful people to fold into the word anxiety. The chart at the foot of her bed told a cleaner story than the one her body was living. Matilda Brooks, 18 years old, admitted after acute anxiety episode with reported burning sensation along neck and shoulder. Mild skin irritation noted. No severe dermatological abnormality confirmed. Psychiatric consult recommended. Observation continued. The words sat there with the cold confidence of official language, each sentence like a small locked door. They did not mention the way Matilda woke every night at nearly the same hour. They did not mention that the burning was always on the same side of her neck. They did not mention that the pain began only after her head had rested against the hospital pillow for hours. They did not mention the shame that rose in her chest every time another adult smiled gently and said, "Stress can do strange things to the body. Stress, anxiety, adjustment reaction, somatic symptoms." Each phrase became another stone dropped into her pockets while she was already trying to swim. At 2:19 a.m., the door to room 414 opened, and Dr. Calvin Mercer stepped inside with the expression of a man who had been interrupted during something more important. Mercer was 48, tall, trim, and handsome in a polished way that made patients trust him quickly and nurses watch him carefully. His dark blonde hair was brushed back from a high forehead, his jaw was clean-shaven, and his blue eyes carried the calm impatience of someone accustomed to being believed the first time he spoke. He had built his career on certainty. Years earlier, during his residency, he had misdiagnosed a patient who later survived only because a nurse challenged him in front of an entire surgical team. The patient lived, but Mercer never forgave the humiliation. Since then, he had treated doubt as an insult and questions as a kind of rebellion. Behind him came Patricia Vale, the night charge nurse, a woman in her early 50s with a square face, iron gray hair cut at chin length, and a voice that could sound tender or sharp depending on who was listening. Patricia had worked at Riverside for 27 years. She knew every policy, every administrator, and every quiet punishment the hospital could deliver without ever calling it punishment. To patients, she often appeared motherly. To younger nurses, she could be a gatekeeper standing at the entrance to a kingdom that had made her tired long ago. Matilda gripped the blanket. "Please don't make me lie back down on it." Dr. Mercer looked at the pillow, then at Patricia, then at Matilda. "No one is making you do anything dramatic, Matilda. We're trying to help you calm down. It burns when I touch it. It is hospital linen," he said. "Sterile, laundered, standard issue. That doesn't mean nothing is wrong with it." Patricia stepped closer to the bed. "Sweetheart, you've had a long week. Your body is exhausted. Fear can attach itself to objects. It happens more than people think." Matilda hated that word, sweetheart. It sounded kind, but in Patricia's mouth it became a curtain pulled over a window. "I know what fear feels like," Matilda whispered. "This is pain." Dr. Mercer exhaled through his nose. "Pain perception is complicated." The sentence landed like a verdict. Matilda looked from his face to Patricia's and felt something inside her sink. They were not listening. They were performing listening, which was worse, because it made her feel foolish for wanting more. Her throat tightened. She wanted her father. She wanted the version of herself who would have demanded answers. But that girl seemed far away now, standing on the other side of 6 sleepless nights and a chart full of words that made her sound unreliable. Near the doorway, almost unnoticed, stood Emma Carter. Emma was 31 years old, though exhaustion and discipline made her seem older in stillness and younger when she smiled, which was rare at work. She was of medium height with a lean, practical build, warm brown skin, dark hair pulled into a low braid, and gray-brown eyes that seemed quiet until they focused on something. Then they sharpened. She had a faint scar along the underside of her chin, barely visible unless the light caught it. A souvenir from a highway pileup during her first year as an emergency nurse when she crawled through broken glass to hold pressure on a stranger's bleeding neck. Emma did not talk about that night. She did not talk much about any night that had shaped her. Her father had been a paramedic in Louisville, a broad-shouldered man with a laugh like thunder and hands gentle enough to calm frightened children. He died when Emma was 22, not from violence or illness, but from a delayed diagnosis after a tired doctor dismissed his chest pain as reflux. Since then, Emma had carried a private law inside herself. Listen first, decide later. It had made her a good nurse. It had also made her inconvenient. Emma had been assigned to the surgical recovery floor at Riverside for almost 2 years. She knew which doctors treated nurses like furniture. She knew which administrators used the phrase patient-centered care when they really meant lawsuit prevention. She knew which patients were labeled difficult because they asked questions nobody wanted to answer. Until that night, Matilda Brooks had been only a name Emma had seen during shift changes, a young patient with anxiety and skin irritation. But when Emma looked at the girl pressed against the headboard, she did not see a dramatic patient. She saw someone fighting to stay believed inside her own body. Then Matilda turned her head. The movement exposed the left side of her neck. Emma saw the marks. They began just below the ear and trailed downward toward the collarbone in faint clusters, red and raised. Not a smooth rash, but a broken constellation. Some marks were sharper than others, like tiny points of inflammation arranged with unsettling intention. Emma moved one step closer without thinking. The room continued around her, Mercer speaking, Patricia murmuring, Matilda breathing, but Emma's attention narrowed until only the marks remained. She had seen allergic reactions. They spread like weather. She had seen stress hives. They bloomed unevenly, fading and flaring with the nervous system storms. These marks were different. They had spacing, repetition, contact. Something had touched her there, more than once, in a pattern too specific to be explained away by panic. Dr. Mercer, Emma said. He paused, not turning fully. Yes. Has anyone photographed the irritation on her neck tonight? Patricia's eyes flicked toward Emma, warning first, words second. Emma, we have this under control. I'm asking if it has been documented tonight. Mercer turned then, his expression still polite, but thinner now. The skin findings have been evaluated. Tonight, the case has been reviewed. Emma stepped closer to the bed. Matilda, may I look at your neck? Matilda looked at her as if she had been offered water in a desert and feared it might be a trick. You believe me? Emma did not answer too quickly. False comfort was another kind of harm. I believe something is irritating your skin. I want to understand what. The girl's eyes filled, not with relief exactly, but with the pain of almost receiving it. She nodded. Emma pulled on gloves from the wall dispenser and approached carefully, keeping her movements slow. Up close, the marks were worse. The redness was fresh, warm at the edges. Emma used a small penlight and angled it across the skin. There were clusters near the hairline, then a second line lower on the neck, then scattered points at the top of the shoulder. Not scratches, not self-inflicted, not random. Matilda held very still, as though any movement might cause the adults to withdraw this fragile permission to be taken seriously. How long after you lie down does the burning start? Emma asked. Matilda swallowed. I don't know exactly. I fall asleep, then I wake up and it's happening. Usually after midnight. Sometimes around 2. Always this side. Yes. Do you sleep mostly on your left side? I try not to anymore, but I wake up that way sometimes. Has the pillow been changed? Patricia answered before Matilda could. Linens are changed according to protocol. Emma kept her eyes on Matilda. Do you remember anyone changing it? Matilda hesitated. They changed the case. I don't know about the pillow itself. Dr. Mercer folded his arms. Nurse Carter, this line of questioning is not clinically useful. Emma stood upright. It may be. His mouth tightened. The patient has a documented anxiety presentation. She also has a physical finding. A mild irritation. A patterned irritation. Patricia gave a soft laugh, the kind meant to make disagreement seem childish. Patterns appear everywhere if you look hard enough. Emma looked at her. And sometimes they appear because something is making them. For a moment, the room changed temperature. Not literally, but socially. Matilda felt it. Even in her fear, she understood that Emma had crossed some invisible line. Dr. Mercer stared at the nurse with the faint surprise of a man who had opened a familiar drawer and found something living inside. Step into the hall, he said. Emma removed her gloves slowly, disposed of them, and followed him out. Patricia remained in the room, adjusting Matilda's blanket with brisk hands that did not feel comforting. Through the partially open door, Matilda could hear voices, but not every word. In the hall, the fluorescent lights hummed over polished floors. Riverside Regional Medical Center's 4th floor was known for its calm. The walls were painted a soft blue-gray, the kind selected by committees to imply peace without risking personality. Framed photographs of Kentucky horse farms lined the corridor, green fields and white fences glowing under imaginary sun. At night, those photographs looked almost cruel. Beyond the windows, Lexington slept under rain while inside the hospital machines breathed, elevators opened, carts whispered, and secrets moved quietly in shoes with rubber soles. Dr. Mercer faced Emma near the nurse's station. You are not helping that girl. Emma kept her voice low. I'm not trying to frighten her. I'm trying to assess her. You are validating a fixation. I'm validating a physical observation. His jaw flexed. This is exactly how anxiety spirals. A patient attaches fear to an object. Staff indulge it. Suddenly, we have a behavioral crisis over a pillow. Emma thought of her father sitting at a kitchen table with one hand pressed to his chest, embarrassed for making a fuss. She thought of the doctor who had said acid reflux without ordering the test that might have saved him. She felt the old anger rise, but anger was a fire she had learned to bank carefully. It could warm judgment or burn it down. I understand anxiety can amplify symptoms, she said. But those marks are real. No one said they weren't. You're treating them like they don't matter. Patricia emerged from the room and closed the door behind her. Matilda is calmer now. I told her we'd get her a fresh pillowcase. Emma looked at her. Not the pillow. Patricia's expression cooled. A pillowcase is appropriate. Why not replace the pillow entirely? Because replacing every item a patient develops a fear around reinforces the fear, or it removes a possible source of irritation. Dr. Mercer's patience ended visibly. Enough. You will chart vital signs, medication administration, and observe skin condition if necessary. You will not conduct an independent investigation into hospital pillows. Emma said nothing for a beat. Silence was often mistaken for surrender. She had learned to use that. Mercer continued. If you have concerns, bring them through the proper chain. I am bringing them to you. And I am telling you the clinical plan remains unchanged. Patricia placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, light but controlling. Go finish your rounds. Emma looked down at Patricia's hand until the charge nurse removed it. Yes, Emma said. I'll finish my rounds. She did. She checked on Mr. Alvarez in 408, a retired mechanic with a new hip and a stubborn refusal to admit pain above a 3. She adjusted fluids for Mrs. Bennett in 411, a silver-haired widow who thanked every nurse as if kindness were a formal debt. She answered a call light for a confused post-operative patient who wanted to know why his wife had not brought the dog, though visiting hours had ended 6 hours earlier, and, according to his chart, his wife had been dead for 9 years. Emma did the work because the work mattered. The living did not pause because the truth had begun tapping from inside a wall. But between each task, her mind returned to room 414. At 3:02 a.m., Emma stood at the medication cart and opened Matilda's chart again. She read the notes from admission, then the notes from the following days. The language had evolved in a way that troubled her. On the first day, clinicians wrote reported burning sensation. By the third day, it became perceived burning. By the fifth, it was fixation on pillow as source of distress. The farther Matilda went without being believed, the less real her symptoms became in the record. Emma had seen this before. A chart could become a courtroom where the patient was tried without being allowed to speak. She scrolled back to the dermatology consult. No significant lesions observed at time of exam. Recommend emollient cream. Follow psychiatric evaluation. Emma checked the time of that exam. 10:40 a.m. If Matilda's symptoms worsened at night and faded by morning, then the consult had examined the battlefield after the smoke cleared and declared there had been no war. Emma copied nothing. Riverside monitored chart access closely, but she wrote notes in her small black pocket notebook, the one she carried out of habit. Date. Time. Left neck irritation observed 2:21 a.m. clustered. Focal, non-random distribution. Patient reports nightly burning after sleep. Pillow suspected by patient. Pillow not replaced. Mercer notified. Chain response dismissive. She closed the notebook and slipped it into her scrub pocket. At the far end of the hall, the elevator opened. A man stepped out carrying a folded stack of linens. Emma had seen him before, but never paid close attention. He wore the dark green uniform of environmental services, with a plastic badge clipped to his chest. He was in his mid-40s, maybe older, narrow through the shoulders, with close-cropped black hair showing gray at the temples and a trimmed beard that sharpened his face rather than softened it. His name badge read Blake Sutter. His skin had the pale, slightly weathered look of someone who smoked outside in all seasons. His eyes were small and dark, and they moved over the hallway quickly without seeming to move at all. Emma had the immediate impression of a man who knew how not to be noticed. Some people became invisible because others dismissed them. Others practiced invisibility like a skill. Blake nodded once at Patricia near the nurse's station. Patricia nodded back without surprise. Emma watched him turn toward the supply alcove near room 414. What's environmental doing up here at 3? Emma asked. Patricia did not look up from her screen. Linen rotation. At 3 in the morning? Night shift exists, Emma. Blake disappeared into the alcove. A moment later, he came out without the stack of linens. His hands were empty. He walked past room 414, not entering, not stopping, but his gaze slid toward the door for half a second too long. Emma noticed. It was a small thing. So small it would sound ridiculous if spoken aloud. A glance. A nod. A linen stack. Hospitals were built from small things. So were cover-ups. At 3:17 a.m., Emma returned to Matilda's room under the legitimate excuse of reassessing pain. The room was dim except for the monitor glow. Matilda was awake, eyes fixed on the pillow, which now sat propped against the wall behind the bed like an innocent witness. "You came back," Matilda whispered. Emma pulled the visitor chair closer. "I said I wanted to understand." Matilda's fingers twisted the blanket. "They think I'm crazy. They think you're anxious. That's just a nicer word for crazy when they don't believe you." Emma sat with that. The girl was young, but pain had made her precise. "You can be anxious and still be right about something." Matilda looked at her. "Do you really think something is wrong with the pillow?" "I think your symptoms have a pattern. I think the pillow is part of that pattern. I don't know how yet." Matilda breathed in shakily. "My mom says I've always had an imagination. When I was little, I used to tell stories about monsters under the porch. She thinks this is like that." "Is it?" "No." The answer came fast, fierce, and then softer. "No. I wish it was. I wish I was just scared. Being scared would be easier than everyone looking at me like I'm disappearing while I'm still talking." Emma's chest tightened. She knew that kind of disappearance. Not as a patient, but as a daughter sitting in a waiting room while men with titles explained why nothing more could have been done. "Tell me exactly what happens," Emma said. "Not what you told them. Tell me what you feel." So Matilda told her. She told her about the first night, when she woke with heat under her jaw and thought a bug had crawled into the bed. She told her about calling the nurse, about the cream, about being embarrassed. She told her about the second night, worse than the first. The third night, she had tried sleeping upright, but exhaustion folded her sideways before morning. The fourth night, she noticed the pain came from where her neck touched the pillow. The fifth night, she asked for a new pillow and received only a new case. The sixth night, she threw it because fear had become stronger than shame. Emma listened without interrupting. That alone nearly broke Matilda. "Has anyone visited you late at night?" Emma asked. Matilda frowned. "Nurses. Anyone else?" "A cleaning man came in once. Maybe twice. He said he was checking room supplies." "What did he look like?" "I don't know. Thin. Beard. Dark uniform." She hesitated. "He smelled like cigarettes and mint gum." Emma kept her face still. "Did he touch the pillow?" Matilda's eyes shifted toward it. "Yes. He said it had fallen wrong behind my head. He fluffed it." "When?" "Last night. Maybe the night before, too. I was half asleep." Emma wrote nothing in front of her. She did not want Matilda to feel like evidence. "Thank you. Are you going to tell Dr. Mercer?" "Not yet." "Why?" "Because I need to be careful." Matilda gave a tiny, humorless laugh. "That's what everyone says before they do nothing." Emma leaned forward. "I am not doing nothing." For the first time, a fragile thread of trust passed between them. Outside the room, a shadow moved across the narrow window in the door. Emma turned. No one was there when she looked fully, but the hallway beyond seemed suddenly too quiet. At 4:08 a.m., Emma found Blake Sutter's name in the staff directory. Environmental Services Technician. Assigned to floors 3 through 5. Night rotation. 6 years at Riverside. She found nothing unusual in the basic listing, but basic listings were designed to be boring. She checked the floor cleaning logs. Room 414 had no scheduled environmental service after 9 p.m. Yet Matilda had described a cleaning man entering after midnight. Emma checked linen replacement logs. Pillowcase replacement recorded twice. Pillow replacement not recorded once. By 4:30 a.m., Emma had 3 facts that did not belong together. Matilda's patterned injuries, an unchanged pillow, and an environmental services worker entering without a documented reason. By 5 a.m., she had a 4th. The hallway camera outside room 414 had a maintenance blackout from 1:58 a.m. to 2:41 a.m. on 3 separate nights. Emma stared at the screen, pulse steady but heavier now. Coincidences happened. Repeated coincidences were messages from the dark. Looking for something? Emma turned. Patricia stood behind her. The charge nurse's face was unreadable, but her eyes had sharpened. In the bluish glow of the workstation, she looked older, not because of wrinkles, but because suspicion had pulled something tired and hard to the surface. "Camera maintenance logs," Emma said. "Why?" "Because a patient reported unauthorized room entry." Patricia's mouth thinned. "Matilda reported a lot of things." "Yes," Emma said. "She did." "Emma." Patricia lowered her voice. "You are a good nurse. But good nurses can ruin themselves by confusing instinct with authority." Emma closed the screen. And bad institutions ruin patients by confusing authority with truth. For 1 second, Patricia looked almost wounded. Then the expression vanished. You need to let this go. Emma studied her. Why? Because Dr. Mercer has made the plan clear. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight. Patricia walked away. Emma stood alone at the workstation, listening to the rain tap softly against the windows. Somewhere behind her, room 414 held a frightened girl and an ordinary white pillow. Somewhere in the hospital, a man who smelled of cigarettes and mint gum moved through corridors that trusted him because he belonged to the machinery of the place. And above all of them stood Riverside itself, gleaming, respected, polished smooth by reputation, like a temple built to healing gods that had forgotten to listen for prayers. Emma touched the notebook in her pocket. She did not yet know what was inside the pillow. She did not know who Blake Sutter really was, or why the camera failed at the exact hours Matilda suffered most. She did not know how far the silence around this room extended, but she knew the girl was not imagining the marks on her neck. She knew pain had a shape. She knew fear could be evidence when everyone else mistook it for weakness. At 5:26 a.m., before dawn touched Lexington, Emma Carter made one final note. Patient Matilda Brooks remains fearful of pillow. Visible patterned irritation persists. Staff response continues to frame symptoms as anxiety despite physical findings. Possible environmental contact source. Further observation required. Then she closed the notebook, looked down the hall toward room 414, and made a quiet promise no one heard. She would keep watching. A cold spring rain drifted across Lexington, Kentucky, painting the city in silver reflections while the lights of Riverside Regional Medical Center glowed against the darkness like a lighthouse surrounded by secrets. By the sixth night, Matilda Brooks had stopped expecting anyone to believe her. At 18 years old, she was old enough to recognize pity when she heard it and young enough to still be hurt by it. The hospital room smelled faintly of disinfectant, clean linen, and the artificial chill of recycled air. Machines hummed softly in the background. Nurses moved through hallways outside her door. Elevators opened and closed somewhere in the distance. Everything sounded normal. Everything except the pain. Matilda sat upright in bed, her back pressed against the headboard. The pillow had been pushed as far away from her as possible. It rested near the foot of the bed like an unwelcome visitor. Her hand trembled as she touched the left side of her neck. The burning had returned. Not a sharp pain, not the sting of a cut. A deep, crawling heat that seemed to spread beneath her skin. The sensation always started after she slept. Always. The pattern was so consistent that she could predict it better than the nurses could predict medication schedules. Every night. Every single night. The first time it happened, she assumed she was having an allergic reaction. The second time, she worried it might be an infection. The third time, she became frightened. By the sixth night, fear had transformed into something else. Isolation. Because pain was difficult. Being doubted was worse. Matilda had grown up in a quiet neighborhood outside Lexington. Her father, Nathan Brooks, was a retired Navy officer who believed problems could be solved through patience and discipline. Her mother, Caroline Brooks, taught literature at a local college and spent most of her life surrounded by books. Their home had always been calm, predictable, safe. Matilda had inherited her mother's sensitivity and her father's honesty. She wasn't rebellious. She wasn't dramatic. Teachers described her as thoughtful. Friends described her as kind. Her parents described her as stubborn whenever she believed something was true. Now that stubbornness was the only thing preventing her from accepting what everyone else was telling her. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's stress. Maybe you're imagining it. Maybe it's all in your head. She stared at the pillow. No, something was wrong. The door opened quietly. A nurse stepped inside carrying a tablet. Emma Carter. Matilda had met dozens of nurses during her stay. Most had been polite. Some had been kind. Only Emma had listened. Emma was 31 years old and carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who understood chaos without becoming part of it. She stood 5'7" with an athletic build earned from years of 12-hour shifts and constant movement. Her dark brown hair was tied neatly into a braid that rested against the back of her scrubs. A small scar beneath her chin was visible whenever she tilted her head. Patients trusted her quickly, not because she smiled constantly, because she paid attention. There was a difference. Emma approached the bedside. You haven't slept. Matilda laughed softly. You sound surprised. Emma glanced at the pillow. You moved it. I don't want it near me. The nurse pulled a chair closer and sat down. Most staff members stood when speaking to patients. Emma sat. It was a small gesture, yet it made conversations feel different. More equal. Tell me what happened tonight. The same thing. The burning. Matilda nodded. Same place. Emma studied the redness along her neck. The marks looked worse. Not dramatically worse, but enough. Enough to bother her. Enough to make her question everything written inside the chart. The irritation wasn't spreading randomly. The pattern remained concentrated, focused, repeated, almost as if something kept touching the exact same area. Emma had spent nearly 10 years in healthcare, long enough to understand that patterns mattered, long enough to understand that patients were often ignored when their symptoms didn't fit convenient explanations, long enough to know that certainty could become dangerous. She gently examined the skin. The area felt slightly warmer than surrounding tissue. Again, the same location, the same shape, the same unusual distribution. What are you thinking? Matilda asked quietly. Emma hesitated. I think I need more information. The teenager looked disappointed. You think I'm crazy too? No. The answer came immediately, firmly. No, I don't. For the first time that night, Matilda looked directly at her. Emma continued. I think something is happening. What? I don't know yet. The honesty mattered more than reassurance. At least it was real. At least it wasn't another explanation designed to make the problem disappear. Emma stood. Her eyes drifted back toward the pillow. Something about it bothered her. Perhaps it was simply because Matilda was so focused on it. Perhaps because the symptoms seemed connected. Or perhaps because instinct had begun whispering. She reached toward it, lifted it, and paused. The pillow felt heavier than expected. Not dramatically. Not enough that someone carrying it would notice immediately, but enough that Emma noticed. She lowered it slowly. Hospital pillows were familiar objects. Thousands had passed through her hands over the years. This one felt different. Not by much. Just enough. Her eyes narrowed. Emma. The nurse looked back toward Matilda. When was this pillow last replaced? I don't know. The pillow itself. They changed the cases. Not the pillow. I've never seen them replace it. Emma turned the pillow over. The hospital tag remained attached. Nothing looked unusual. No tears. No visible damage. No obvious explanation. Yet the feeling remained. Something wasn't right. The door opened again. This time it was Patricia Vale. The charge nurse stopped immediately when she saw Emma holding the pillow. Patricia was 53, broad-shouldered, practical, and intimidating without trying. Years of leadership had sharpened her personality. She wasn't cruel. She simply trusted procedures more than people. Everything all right? Patricia asked. Emma placed the pillow back on the bed, just assessing the patient. Patricia looked at Matilda, then at Emma, then at the pillow. Her expression changed slightly. Only slightly. But Emma noticed. What? Emma asked. Nothing. Patricia. The older woman sighed. The patient has already been evaluated. I'm aware. Then stop chasing ghosts. The words lingered. Ghosts. Interesting choice. Emma watched Patricia leave. Something about the interaction bothered her. The charge nurse had seemed nervous. Not frightened. Defensive. As if the pillow itself represented a conversation she didn't want happening. The thought sounded ridiculous. It should have sounded ridiculous. Instead it stayed. Later that morning, after her shift officially ended, Emma remained inside the hospital. Most exhausted nurses hurried home. Emma walked toward the staff records office. The hallway was nearly empty. Administrative employees had not yet fully arrived. Perfect. She logged into a workstation. Nothing illegal. Nothing inappropriate. Just curiosity. She searched maintenance records associated with the 4th floor. Routine inspections. Cleaning schedules. Supply deliveries. Nothing unusual. Then she searched access logs. Room 414. Matilda's room. Again. Nothing. Until she noticed something strange. Several corridor camera recordings had been flagged for maintenance review. Not once. Multiple times. The same hallway. The same location. Over a 2-week period. Emma frowned. Hospitals contained hundreds of cameras. Most rarely malfunctioned. Yet this particular hallway seemed unusually unlucky. She clicked deeper. Access restricted. Interesting. Very interesting. A voice interrupted her. Looking for something? Emma turned. The man standing behind her wore a maintenance uniform. Mid-40s. Lean. Angular face. Short dark hair streaked with gray. Trimmed beard. Sharp eyes. His identification badge read, Derek Vaughn, Facilities Maintenance. Emma had seen him before. Everyone had. He blended into the background the way maintenance workers often did. Yet standing this close, she realized something. He was watching her screen. Not casually. Carefully. I was checking equipment reports. Derek smiled. The expression never reached his eyes. Exciting stuff. I've seen worse. That's healthcare. His voice carried the dry humor of someone who rarely revealed genuine thoughts. Emma closed the screen. What brings you here? Work order. He lifted a clipboard. Simple. Reasonable. Yet something felt rehearsed. Emma studied him. Derek was the type of man people forgot moments after seeing him. Average height. Average build. Average face. Nothing memorable. Sometimes that was its own warning sign. People who spent years avoiding attention became skilled at invisibility. You work this floor often? Emma asked. Whenever something breaks. Been here much lately? A few times. He shrugged. Big building. Then he walked away. Emma watched him disappear down the corridor. An uncomfortable feeling settled into her stomach. She couldn't explain why. She had exchanged less than 30 seconds of conversation with the man. Nothing suspicious. Nothing concrete. Nothing she could report. Yet instinct remained stubborn. That same afternoon, Emma reviewed staffing logs. Then maintenance requests. Then access records. A pattern slowly emerged. Not enough to prove anything. Enough to notice. Derek Vaughn appeared near the fourth floor more frequently than expected. Far more frequently. Especially during overnight hours. Especially near room 414. Emma leaned back in her chair. The rain continued outside. Cars moved through Lexington traffic. Doctors finished rounds. Patients received medication. The hospital functioned normally. Yet beneath that normalcy, something felt wrong. Matilda's injuries. The strange pillow. Missing camera footage. Derek Vaughn. Separately, none of it meant much. Together, they formed the outline of a question. Questions made administrators nervous. Emma discovered exactly how nervous later that evening. She received a message requesting an immediate meeting. Location: Administrative Office Suite. 5th floor. She arrived 20 minutes later. The office belonged to Richard Holloway, Chief Executive Officer. Richard Holloway was 61 years old, tall and silver-haired, with the polished appearance of a man who spent more time managing perception than solving problems. His expensive suits fit perfectly. His handshake was practiced. His smile belonged on fundraising brochures. People loved him. Investors trusted him. The hospital board admired him. And Emma immediately disliked him. Not because he was rude. Because he was too smooth. Too controlled. The office overlooked downtown Lexington. Richard gestured toward a chair. Please sit. Emma remained standing for a moment before taking the seat. The CEO folded his hands. I've heard you've taken an interest in one of our patients. Matilda Brooks. Yes. His smile remained. Polite. Professional. Cold. The patient is receiving appropriate care. I'm aware. Then why are you investigating maintenance records? There it was. Not concern. Surveillance. Someone had informed him. Quickly, Emma kept her expression neutral. I noticed inconsistencies. Richard's smile faded slightly. Your job is patient care. My patient is involved. Not in administrative matters. The room grew quieter. Emma suddenly understood something important. This meeting wasn't about helping Matilda. It was about stopping questions. Richard leaned forward. Let the physicians handle the case. What if they're wrong? A long silence followed. The CEO's eyes hardened. Only for a second. Then the smile returned. We all have responsibilities, Nurse Carter. Emma stood. So do patients. She left before he could answer. As the elevator carried her downward, one realization became impossible to ignore. This was no longer about anxiety. It was no longer about a difficult patient. And it was definitely no longer about a pillow. Because powerful people only intervened when something mattered. And Richard Holloway had just made it very clear that something mattered. Very, very much. Emma Carter left Richard Holloway's office with the uneasy feeling that she had just walked out of a conversation that wasn't really a conversation. The elevator descended from the 5th floor in complete silence. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished steel doors. Tired eyes. Loose strands of dark hair escaping her braid. A nurse who should have gone home hours ago. Instead, she was standing in an executive elevator after being quietly warned by the CEO of a major hospital. That alone should have told her enough. Most administrators ignored staff nurses. especially nurses asking inconvenient questions. The fact that Richard Holloway had personally intervened meant one thing. Someone had informed him. Quickly, very quickly, Emma stepped out onto the fourth floor. The hallway looked exactly the same as it always did. Patients sleeping, monitors beeping, staff moving between rooms. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, like stepping onto ice and hearing a crack beneath the surface. Not enough to break. Enough to know the danger was there. She walked directly toward room 414. Matilda was awake. Again, the teenager sat near the window wrapped in a blanket. Outside, Lexington's gray afternoon sky hung low over the city. Rain continued falling steadily. Matilda looked exhausted. Dark circles sat beneath her green eyes. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, the kind people made when they no longer cared how they looked. What happened? Matilda asked immediately. Emma paused. You mean with the doctors? No. Matilda shook her head. The pillow. The question surprised her. Why would you ask that? The girl hesitated, then lowered her voice. Because someone came into my room. Emma's pulse quickened. When? About an hour ago. Who? I don't know. Matilda glanced toward the door. He wasn't wearing scrubs. Emma pulled a chair closer. Tell me exactly what happened. The teenager swallowed. I was sleeping. What woke you up? The door. She rubbed her hands together nervously. I heard someone come inside. Did he say anything? No. What did he do? Matilda looked toward the bed. The pillow. Emma followed her gaze. The pillow sat exactly where it always did. Ordinary. White. Harmless. Or pretending to be. He touched it. Matilda nodded. He picked it up. Emma leaned forward. And then, he looked at me. The girl shivered slightly. Not normal. What do you mean? It felt like he was checking something. Checking what? I don't know. The answer came quickly. Too quickly. Because Matilda had already asked herself that question 100 times. He looked disappointed. Emma stared. Disappointed? Matilda nodded. Like he expected something. The room fell silent. Emma knew how irrational that sounded. She also knew trauma often attached itself to details others ignored. Expressions. Movements. Small things. The human brain remembered danger even when it couldn't explain it. What did he look like? Again the teenager hesitated. Tall. How tall? Maybe 6 feet. Hair. Dark. What else? A beard. Emma's stomach tightened. Derek Vaughn. The description matched. Not perfectly. Enough. What happened after that? He left. Without saying anything? Without saying anything. Emma looked toward the pillow. The same pillow. The same room. The same patient. And now a maintenance employee kept appearing around both. The coincidence was beginning to collapse under its own weight. Too many pieces fit together. Too many questions remained unanswered. Later that evening, Emma found herself standing inside supply storage room B. Technically, she wasn't breaking any rules. Technically, the storage room held hundreds of pillows. Identical. Stacked in neat rows. Emma lifted one. Standard hospital pillow. Lightweight. Soft. Exactly what she expected. Then she compared it mentally to Matilda's pillow. Different. Not dramatically. Just enough. She picked up another. Same weight. Another. Same. The difference wasn't imagination. It was real. A voice interrupted her. Looking for something? Emma nearly jumped. The speaker stood in the doorway. Thomas Grady. 26 years old. Respiratory therapist. Tall and lanky with sandy blonde hair and a perpetual expression of mild confusion. Thomas was the kind of man everyone liked. Not because he tried. Because he genuinely liked people. Even difficult people. Especially difficult people. He possessed the rare ability to remain optimistic inside hospitals. A skill many healthcare workers lost within their first few years. Emma lowered the pillow. Just checking supplies. Thomas raised an eyebrow. At 7 p.m.? Maybe. You're terrible at lying. Emma laughed despite herself. Fair. Thomas stepped inside. His smile faded slightly. What's going on? Emma considered. Thomas wasn't part of administration. Wasn't part of management. More importantly, he was trustworthy. Or seemed trustworthy. Trust had become complicated lately. You know the girl in 414? Matilda? Emma nodded. Something's wrong. Thomas crossed his arms. Medical wrong? I don't think so. That got his attention. The therapist leaned against a shelf. Then what kind of wrong? Emma lowered her voice. The kind people don't want investigated. For several seconds Thomas said nothing. Then he surprised her. I thought so too. Emma stared. What? The marks. His expression grew serious. I noticed them yesterday. You did? They don't look right. Relief washed through her unexpectedly. Another person. Someone else had seen it. Someone else wasn't dismissing everything. What do you think? Thomas shrugged. I think something is causing them. Helpful. I know. He smiled briefly, then grew serious again. Administrators involved. Emma nodded. The smile disappeared completely. That's bad. Why? Because administrators don't care about rashes. The bluntness startled her. Thomas continued. They care about liability. A silence settled between them. Both understood the implication. If executives were paying attention, then the problem extended beyond ordinary medicine. Far beyond. That night Emma made a decision. A dangerous one. Not dangerous physically. Professionally. She waited until shortly after midnight. Then she entered room 414, carrying fresh linens. Matilda looked surprised. It's midnight. I know. What are you doing? Emma closed the door. Changing your bedding. The teenager blinked. Why? Because I want to examine the pillow. For the first time in days, hope appeared in Matilda's eyes. Real hope. Not reassurance. Not sympathy. Hope. Emma approached the bed. Slowly. Carefully. The pillow felt heavier again. Definitely heavier. No doubt now. Sometimes you don't know what's behind a door until it's open. Then she left. The warning lingered long after she disappeared. Emma looked back toward the pillow. Something hidden inside. A maintenance worker appearing repeatedly. Camera footage disappearing. Administrators intervening. A CEO issuing personal warnings. A charge nurse showing fear. The pieces were beginning to form a picture. Not a complete picture. Enough. Enough to know this wasn't anxiety. Enough to know Matilda had been telling the truth. Enough to know someone inside Riverside Regional Medical Center was desperately trying to keep that truth hidden. And for the first time since the investigation began, Emma found herself asking a question she hadn't wanted to consider. What if the pillow wasn't the target? What if Matilda was? The thought settled heavily into the darkness of room 414. Outside, rain continued falling over Lexington. Inside the hospital, hidden behind polished walls and professional smiles, something was moving. And Emma Carter had just stepped directly into its path. Emma Carter barely slept. The few hours she spent in her apartment felt less like rest and more like a temporary interruption. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same things replaying in different combinations. Matilda's frightened face. The strange weight hidden inside the pillow. Derek Vaughn standing silently in hospital corridors at impossible hours. Richard Holloway's carefully controlled smile. Patricia Vale's warning. Sometimes you don't know what's behind a door until it's open. Most people would have taken the warning as advice. Emma took it as confirmation. People only warned others away from something when they were afraid of what might be discovered. The following evening she returned to Riverside Regional Medical Center under a sky filled with low gray clouds. Lexington looked tired beneath the approaching rain. Commuters moved through wet streets. Store signs reflected off puddles. The city carried on normally, completely unaware that inside one of its most respected hospitals, a frightened 18-year-old girl might be at the center of something far darker than medical negligence. When Emma stepped through the employee entrance, she immediately sensed the atmosphere had changed. Not dramatically, subtly. Conversations seemed to stop a second earlier than normal. People looked away slightly faster. Patricia avoided her completely during shift handoff. Even Dr. Mercer appeared unusually distracted. The hospital was behaving like a family pretending nothing was wrong, while everyone secretly knew something terrible had happened. Emma accepted her assignment sheet and headed toward room 414. Matilda sat in the same chair near the window. She looked worse. The redness on her neck had spread slightly lower toward her collarbone. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes. Exhaustion had settled into her face. Yet when she saw Emma enter, relief immediately appeared. You're back. The words carried more emotion than she intended. Emma pulled the chair closer. How was today? Terrible. Any visitors? My parents. That surprised her. You didn't mention they were coming. Matilda looked down. I asked them not to. Why? The teenager hesitated, then sighed. Because they're starting to believe the doctors. The words hurt more than she expected. Emma knew exactly what she meant. Fear isolated people. But being doubted by family created a different kind of loneliness. A deeper one. My dad wants to believe me. Matilda continued quietly. I can tell. What about your mother? A sad smile appeared. Mom thinks stress explains everything. Emma nodded. Some people feared terrible truths so much that they preferred comforting lies, even when those lies hurt the people they loved. The nurse carefully examined the marks again. Still patterned, still concentrated, still completely inconsistent with anything resembling anxiety. Has anyone touched the pillow today? Matilda immediately looked toward the bed. Not while I was awake. Emma noticed the wording. While you were awake? The girl nodded. I woke up around noon. And the pillow was facing a different direction. A chill moved through Emma. You're sure? Yes. Could a nurse have adjusted it? Maybe. Matilda swallowed. But I don't think so. The room fell quiet. Neither woman said what both were thinking. Someone continued entering the room. Someone continued handling the pillow. Someone continued doing it when nobody was watching. That night Emma made a decision. She would stop waiting for answers. She would collect them herself. At 11:37 p.m., she sat alone in a vacant charting room near the end of the fourth-floor corridor. The small office contained 2 computers, a filing cabinet, and a narrow observation window overlooking the hallway leading toward room 414. From there, she could monitor the area without attracting attention. Officially, she was completing documentation. Unofficially, she was watching. The hallway remained quiet. Nurses moved through their routines. Patients slept. Machines beeped softly. Hours passed. Midnight arrived. Then 1 o'clock. At 1:16 a.m., movement appeared. Emma immediately straightened. Derek Vaughn stepped off the elevator. The maintenance worker carried a clipboard. Nothing unusual. Nothing suspicious. Except for one detail. There was no active maintenance request on the 4th floor. Emma had checked. Twice. Derek moved calmly through the hallway. Not hurried. Not nervous. Comfortable. Like a man walking a familiar route. He passed 2 patient rooms. 3. 4. Then stopped near room 414. Emma's pulse accelerated. Derek glanced left. Then right. A quick check. Professional. Practiced. He opened the door and stepped inside. Emma immediately checked her phone. 1:18 a.m. She recorded the time. Then activated her camera. Not to film inside the room. Only to document what happened. Every minute mattered now. The hallway remained empty. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then 3. Derek remained inside. Too long for a routine check. Far too long. At the 5-minute mark, Emma left the charting room. Carefully, quietly, she moved down the hallway until she reached a position near room 414. The door remained mostly closed. Only a narrow gap remained. Through it she could see movement. A shadow. A figure leaning over the bed. Emma raised her phone. Zoomed in. Photographed everything. Timestamp visible. Location visible. Evidence. The figure shifted. Emma saw Derek lift something. The pillow. Her heart began pounding. Not because she finally had proof. Because she realized how deliberate everything was. Derek wasn't checking equipment. He wasn't replacing linen. He wasn't performing maintenance. He was handling the pillow. Again. The same pillow. The same room. The same patient. Night after night. The man remained inside another 60 seconds. Then he carefully repositioned the pillow. Exactly. Precisely. Almost lovingly. The behavior felt wrong. Intimate. Controlled. The actions of someone following a routine. Someone making sure something remained exactly where it belonged. Finally, Derek stepped away from the bed. Emma retreated around the corner seconds before the door opened. The maintenance worker emerged. His expression remained neutral. Professional. Boring. Yet Emma now understood something. The most dangerous people rarely look dangerous. Derek walked away. The elevator doors opened. Then closed. Gone. Emma immediately entered room 414. Matilda sat upright. Wide awake. Terrified. He was here. Emma closed the door. What happened? The maintenance guy? The girl's voice shook. He thought I was asleep. What did he do? He changed the pillow. The nurse froze. Changed it. Matilda nodded. He took mine. A heavy silence followed. Then, and put another one there. Everything stopped. Emma looked toward the bed. The pillow looked identical. White. Ordinary. Standard hospital issue. Exactly like every other pillow in the building. And yet it wasn't. Because Derek had just replaced it. Directly. Secretly. Personally. Emma photographed it immediately. Every angle. Every detail. Every identifying tag. The evidence was finally becoming real. Not suspicion. Not intuition. Evidence. The realization should have felt satisfying. Instead it frightened her. Because if someone was secretly replacing pillows inside a monitored hospital room, then the situation had already progressed far beyond simple misconduct. Someone was actively targeting Matilda. The question was why. At 2:14 a.m., Emma sat alone inside an unused staff lounge reviewing everything she had collected. Photos, timestamps, maintenance records, camera outages, personal notes, patterns. The pieces finally began aligning. Then she discovered something she had missed. A name. Not Derek's. Nathan Brooks. Matilda's father. The reference appeared inside an archived article buried in a military affairs database. Emma stared at the screen, then read it again. 8 years earlier. Naval investigation. Confidential procurement scandal. Several contractors implicated. Multiple arrests. One key witness. Commander Nathan Brooks. Emma's breathing slowed. A coincidence? Maybe. She continued reading. One contractor avoided prison through lack of evidence. The article listed his name. Daniel Vaughn. Emma froze. Vaughn. The same surname. Her pulse quickened. She searched further. Public records appeared. Family connections. Employment history. Addresses. The results arrived slowly. Then everything clicked. Derek Vaughn. Daniel Vaughn. Father and son. Emma leaned back. The room suddenly felt smaller. Years ago, Nathan Brooks helped expose corruption. Years later, Derek Vaughn appeared inside the same hospital as Nathan's daughter. Then strange events began. Not random. Not accidental. Intentional. A possibility formed. Terrible. Logical. What if this wasn't about Matilda personally? What if she was simply the easiest way to hurt someone else? Emma stared at the screen. Revenge. The idea sounded unbelievable. Yet every new fact supported it. 8 years was a long time. Long enough for resentment to grow. Long enough for obsession to mature. Long enough for a patient enemy to create a plan. The door to the lounge opened unexpectedly. Emma nearly jumped. The man entering wore a dark jacket over civilian clothes. Broad shoulders. Short gray-streaked hair. Strong jawline. Calm eyes. Michael Donovan. 47 years old. Former military investigator. Current federal agent. Years earlier, he and Emma had worked together during a military medical oversight operation involving fraudulent treatment records. Michael possessed the rare ability to remain calm during disasters. The trait came from experience and from loss. His younger brother had died during a preventable training accident 20 years earlier after multiple officials ignored safety warnings. Since then, Michael trusted evidence more than authority. Perhaps that was why Emma trusted him. He studied her face. You sounded worried. Emma handed him the file. Read. Michael did. Silently. Patiently. Page after page. Photo after photo. The room remained completely quiet. Finally, he looked up. His expression had changed. That frightened Emma more than anything. Because Michael Donovan rarely reacted to anything. What is it? She asked. The agent set the papers down. Emma. His voice was unusually serious. How many people know you've been collecting this? Not many. Good. The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Michael looked toward the closed door. Then back at her. What you've got here isn't a personnel issue. I know. This isn't hospital misconduct. Emma remained silent. The federal agent exhaled slowly, then delivered the sentence that changed everything. This may be a criminal conspiracy. The words settled heavily between them. Outside the lounge, Riverside Regional Medical Center continued functioning normally. Patients slept. Doctors worked. Monitors beeped. Yet beneath the surface, something dangerous had finally begun revealing itself. And for the first time, federal authorities were about to become involved. For several seconds after Michael Donovan spoke, neither of them moved. The words criminal conspiracy seemed too large for the small staff lounge. Too large for a hospital. Too large for a frightened 18-year-old girl sitting alone in room 414. And yet every piece of evidence pointed in the same direction. Michael leaned back in his chair and carefully organized the documents into a neat stack. That habit had followed him throughout his entire career. When situations became dangerous, he became calmer, more organized, more methodical. Panic belonged to people who lacked information. Michael preferred facts. Start from the beginning, he said. Emma did. She described Matilda's symptoms, the patterned injuries, the unusual weight of the pillow, Derek's repeated nighttime visits, the missing camera footage, Richard Holloway's interference, Patricia's warnings. Everything. Michael listened without interrupting. only occasionally writing notes in a small black notebook he carried everywhere. When she finished, the federal agent stared at the ceiling for several moments, thinking, connecting pieces, testing possibilities. Finally, he spoke. What concerns me most isn't the pillow. Emma frowned. What is? The timeline. He tapped the article mentioning Nathan Brooks. Revenge usually happens quickly. She nodded. Most people don't wait nearly a decade. Exactly. Michael folded his arms. So if someone spent 8 years preparing this. His voice trailed off. Neither needed to finish the thought. An enemy willing to wait 8 years wasn't acting emotionally. They were acting strategically. That made them far more dangerous. Emma looked toward the door. What do we do now? Michael's expression hardened. We verify. How? We confirm Derek Vaughn's connection to the investigation. And if it checks out, the agent met her eyes. Then we open a federal case. The words sent a chill through her. Not because she doubted him, because she believed him. The situation had crossed a line. There would be no going back. At 3:02 a.m., Michael made several phone calls from outside the hospital. Most lasted less than a minute. None sounded dramatic. No one shouted. No one issued threats. Yet Emma knew enough about federal investigations to understand something important. The most significant actions often looked ordinary. A request here. A database search there. A verification process. Quiet steps. Then suddenly entire lives changed. By 3:45 a.m., Michael returned. His expression told her everything before he spoke. Derek Vaughn's father is Daniel Vaughn. Emma exhaled slowly. Confirmation. Not theory. Not coincidence. Confirmation. Michael continued. Daniel Vaughn lost everything after the Brooks investigation. What happened? The agent sat down. Construction contracts. Military contracts. Michael nodded. Fraud. Bribery. Equipment substitution. Emma listened carefully. The Navy discovered millions of dollars in falsified invoices. Nathan testified. He did more than testify. Michael's eyes narrowed. He helped uncover it. The realization landed heavily. Nathan Brooks hadn't simply participated. He had played a central role. That changed everything. Daniel went bankrupt. Michael continued. Marriage collapsed. Business collapsed. Prison? No. The answer surprised her. No prison. Insufficient evidence for criminal conviction. Michael looked down at his notes. But his life was destroyed anyway. A dangerous motive. Perhaps the most dangerous. Someone who lost everything while believing they were the victim often spent years feeding resentment. Years transforming anger into purpose. Emma suddenly understood something else. If Daniel blamed Nathan. Michael nodded. Then Nathan's daughter becomes a target. The room fell silent. Outside, rain struck the hospital windows. Steady. Relentless. Like time itself. At 4:11 a.m., Matilda woke screaming. The sound echoed through the 4th floor. Emma sprinted from the lounge. Michael followed. When they reached room 414, they found Matilda sitting upright in bed, terrified, clutching her neck. The pillow lay on the floor. Again, the teenager's breathing came in rapid bursts. Tears streamed down her face. It happened again. Emma moved immediately to her side. What happened? The burning. Matilda's voice shook violently. It got worse. Emma examined the skin. The redness had intensified. Significantly, the pattern remained identical. But now small raised areas appeared within the irritated region. Her stomach tightened. Something had changed. Something inside the pillow. Michael watched silently from near the doorway. His investigative instincts immediately recognized the significance. Evidence was evolving, and whatever was causing the injuries remained active. That made immediate intervention necessary. Emma looked toward him. We can't leave it there. Michael nodded. No. The agent approached the bed. Carefully, methodically, he examined the pillow without touching it. Years of investigative experience had taught him patience. Evidence mattered. Contamination destroyed cases. What are you thinking? Emma asked. Michael's eyes remained fixed on the pillow. I'm thinking someone expected this. A pause. I'm also thinking they never expected federal involvement. The difference mattered. Because criminals planned for normal responses. They rarely planned for federal agents arriving unexpectedly. At 4:29 a.m., Michael placed a call. This one lasted longer. Nearly 4 minutes. When he finished, his expression had become completely professional. Decision made. Action initiated. What now? Emma asked. The investigation begins. The words sounded simple. They weren't. Michael explained. A federal emergency review team would arrive. Evidence specialists, investigators, medical experts. Not next week. Not tomorrow. Today. Immediately. Because an active threat potentially existed inside a medical facility. And because the target appeared to be the daughter of a former military witness connected to a historical federal case. The situation met multiple thresholds simultaneously. Emma sat down heavily. Everything was moving faster now. Far faster. For days, she had felt alone. Now an entire system was beginning to turn. Michael looked toward the window. Dawn approached. Gray light slowly appeared beyond the ring. The hospital doesn't know yet. Emma understood. That wouldn't last. No, it won't. At 5:13 a.m., Richard Holloway received a phone call. The CEO answered, expecting routine business. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. When it ended, he remained completely still. His assistant later described the moment as the only time she had ever seen him genuinely shocked. Because federal investigators weren't requesting access. They were informing him they were coming. There was a difference. A very important difference. Meanwhile, Patricia Vale sat alone inside her office. The charge nurse stared at her computer screen. Her hands trembled slightly. For years she had convinced herself that staying silent protected people. Protected careers. Protected the hospital. Protected stability. Now she wasn't sure anymore. The problem with silence was that eventually it demanded a price. And sometimes that price arrived all at once. On the 4th floor, Derek Vaughn remained completely unaware. He continued working, completing routine tasks, moving through hallways, checking maintenance requests, appearing ordinary. Yet somewhere deep inside him, instinct had begun whispering. The same instinct that had kept him cautious for years. The same instinct that had taught him patience. Danger was approaching. He simply didn't know it yet. Shortly after sunrise, Emma stood beside the window inside room 414. Matilda sat nearby wrapped in a blanket. Exhausted, but calmer. The girl looked toward the nurse. Am I crazy? The question hurt. Not because Emma lacked an answer. Because she knew how long Matilda had carried that fear. Emma moved closer, then crouched beside her chair. No. The answer came without hesitation. Not even a little. Tears filled Matilda's eyes. This time, they weren't tears of fear. They were something else. Relief. The kind relief becomes after surviving too long without it. Emma continued. Someone should have listened sooner. The teenager nodded. Slowly. Painfully. Because both knew it was true. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside the room, the hospital continued waking up. Staff arrived. Shift changes began. Phones rang. Announcements echoed overhead. Yet beneath that ordinary morning, an extraordinary chain of events had already begun. Federal investigators were traveling toward Lexington. Emergency warrants were being prepared. Military records were being reopened. Names forgotten for nearly a decade were returning to active files. And at the center of everything stood a frightened young woman who had spent 6 nights begging adults to believe her. Michael entered the room. His phone remained in his hand. Team's airborne. Emma looked up. Already. They left 30 minutes ago. The speed surprised her. Not Michael. Federal systems moved slowly until they didn't. Once enough evidence accumulated, momentum became unstoppable. How long? She asked. 2 hours. The agent glanced toward Matilda, then toward the pillow, still lying on the floor, still appearing harmless, still hiding whatever secret had triggered this entire chain of events. Michael's expression hardened. 2 hours and everything changes. No one in the room disagreed, because they all sensed it. The investigation had moved beyond suspicion, beyond theory, beyond internal hospital politics. Now it belonged to federal authorities. And somewhere inside Riverside Regional Medical Center, a secret carefully hidden for years was about to be dragged into the light. The first helicopters would arrive before noon. By 9:07 a.m., the first federal helicopter appeared over Lexington. The sound reached Riverside Regional Medical Center several seconds before anyone saw it. Doctors paused during rounds. Patients turned toward windows. Administrative assistants stopped typing. Even people who knew nothing about the investigation felt something unusual moving through the air. Because helicopters arriving at hospitals were common, federal helicopters arriving unexpectedly were not. Inside room 414, Matilda Brooks sat quietly near the window. The previous night's terror had left her emotionally exhausted. For 6 days, she had been treated like a frightened girl imagining problems that didn't exist. Now strangers from federal agencies were flying across state lines because someone finally believed her. The realization felt surreal. Part of her wanted to feel vindicated. Another part remained afraid. Because if she wasn't imagining it, then something much worse was true. Someone had been hurting her. Deliberately. Across the room, Emma Carter stood beside Michael Donovan. Neither spoke much. The waiting had become difficult. Investigations often seemed exciting from the outside. In reality, they involved long stretches of uncertainty. Waiting for experts. Waiting for evidence. Waiting for facts. Michael checked his watch. 5 minutes. Emma nodded. The federal agent looked surprisingly relaxed. Years of experience had trained him to separate fear from action. The situation was serious. Therefore, emotions became less useful. Facts became everything. A knock sounded at the door. Then another. Michael opened it. 3 people entered. The first was Nathan Brooks. Matilda immediately stood. Dad. The retired naval officer crossed the room and wrapped his daughter in a tight embrace. For several seconds, neither spoke. Neither needed to. Nathan Brooks was 56 years old, broad-shouldered and powerfully built despite retirement. Years in the Navy had left permanent marks on him. His dark hair had faded to steel gray around the temples. Deep lines framed his eyes. A narrow scar crossed the bridge of his left hand, a souvenir from an accident aboard a destroyer nearly 20 years earlier. Unlike many military officers, Nathan rarely raised his voice. Authority followed him naturally. People listened because he remained calm when everyone else panicked. Unfortunately, calm people often blamed themselves when something terrible happened. Emma could see it in his eyes. Guilt. Nathan believed he had failed his daughter. The truth was more complicated. But guilt rarely listened to logic. He pulled back slightly. You okay? Matilda smiled weakly. I'm trying. Nathan nodded. His jaw tightened as he noticed the marks on her neck. The military discipline vanished for a moment. Only a father remained. His hands trembled slightly. A detail most people would miss. Emma noticed. Michael noticed. Nathan quickly regained control. But the damage was done. Everyone in the room understood exactly how much seeing those injuries hurt him. The second person entering the room was a woman carrying a black equipment case. Dr. Rachel Monroe, 48 years old. Tall, elegant, precise. Rachel possessed the kind of presence often found among scientists who spent decades proving people wrong through evidence rather than argument. Her silver blonde hair was pulled into a professional bun. Thin reading glasses rested on her nose. Her green eyes constantly analyzed everything around her. Nothing escaped them. Years earlier, Rachel had become one of the country's leading toxicology specialists after helping identify a rare poisoning method during a federal criminal case involving contaminated pharmaceutical shipments. Since then, she had testified in dozens of major investigations. Hospitals respected her. Criminals feared her. Evidence loved her. Because Rachel Monroe never guessed. She proved. The third person was Special Agent Lucas Reed, 39, former Marine. Current federal investigator, tall and lean with closely cropped dark hair and sharp cheekbones. A faint scar ran along his jawline. Lucas had earned a reputation for finding people who did not want to be found. His personality balanced Michael perfectly. Where Michael remained patient, Lucas pushed forward aggressively. Together, they formed an effective team. Rachel placed her case on a table. Michael gestured toward the pillow. That's our item. Rachel nodded. Nobody touched it. Not since last night. Good. She immediately pulled on protective gloves. The room fell silent. Even Matilda stopped moving. Rachel approached the pillow carefully, almost respectfully. Experienced investigators understood something important. Evidence told stories, but only if handled correctly. She examined the exterior first. Fabric, stitching, hospital identification tag. Nothing unusual. Then she lifted it. Rachel paused. A small change appeared in her expression. The toxicologist looked toward Michael. Did anyone mention the weight? Emma stepped forward. I did. Rachel nodded. You're right. A pulse of satisfaction moved through Emma. Not because she wanted recognition. Because confirmation mattered. Rachel continued examining the pillow. Her fingers moved along the seams. Methodical. Patient. Suddenly she stopped. There. Lucas moved closer. What? Rachel pointed toward a section near one corner. The stitching looked slightly different. Not obvious. Not enough for ordinary people to notice. But visible once someone knew where to look. The thread color varied slightly. Tiny. almost invisible, deliberate. Rachel looked up. This has been opened. Nobody spoke. The room seemed to shrink. Matilda stared at the pillow. Nathan's face darkened. Michael remained completely still. Rachel continued. Recently, the toxicologist opened her case. Inside sat dozens of specialized instruments. Magnifiers, collection tools, evidence containers, chemical testing supplies. The equipment looked more appropriate for a crime laboratory than a hospital room. Perhaps that was exactly what this room had become. For nearly 20 minutes, Rachel worked in silence, examining, measuring, documenting, every action photographed, every observation recorded. Finally, she reached a decision. I'm opening it. Nathan looked at his daughter, then nodded. Rachel carefully cut through the altered seam. The room became perfectly silent. Even the hallway noise seemed distant. A few seconds later, the opening widened. Rachel reached inside, then froze. For the first time since entering the room, genuine surprise crossed her face. Michael immediately noticed. What is it? Rachel slowly withdrew her hand. Something rested between her gloved fingers. Thin strands, almost transparent, delicate, hair-like, except they weren't hair. The fibers shimmered faintly beneath the room's fluorescent lighting. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Rachel stared at them, then looked back inside the pillow. More fibers. Hundreds, possibly thousands, mixed throughout the filling. Emma felt a chill crawl up her spine. What are they? Rachel didn't answer immediately. The scientist continued studying them. Her expression grew increasingly serious. Finally, she looked toward Michael. I need laboratory confirmation. The agent frowned. But Rachel hesitated. An unusual response for someone so certain. Then, I've seen something similar before. The room waited. Rachel carefully placed the fibers inside a sterile evidence container. Her voice lowered. Marine toxin exposure cases. Nathan frowned. Marine? Rachel nodded. Ocean organisms. Confusion spread through the room. Matilda blinked. The ocean? We're in Kentucky. Lucas spoke for the first time in several minutes. Can something from the ocean cause those injuries? Rachel's expression answered before her words did. Yes. A terrible silence followed, because everyone suddenly understood. The injuries, the burning, the pattern, the worsening symptoms, everything. Rachel continued. Some marine organisms contain microscopic defensive structures. She pointed toward the fibers. Repeated exposure can produce localized skin reactions. Emma felt her stomach tighten. Like Matilda's? Rachel nodded slowly. Exactly like Matilda's. Nathan looked ready to explode. Years of military self-control barely contained his anger. My daughter has been sleeping on this. Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. Rachel sealed the evidence container. Then another. And another. The amount of material hidden inside the pillow shocked even her. This wasn't contamination. This wasn't accidental. Someone had placed it there intentionally. A realization that changed everything. Lucas stepped away to make a phone call. His voice remained calm. Professional. Urgent. Within minutes, additional resources were requested. The investigation immediately escalated. Meanwhile, Michael reviewed the implications. Attempted poisoning. Intentional bodily harm. Federal witness retaliation. Evidence tampering. Hospital misconduct. Every new discovery increased the seriousness of the case. And they were only getting started. At 10:42 a.m., another discovery arrived. One of Lucas's agents called. Derek Vaughn wasn't home. The investigator checked again. Still nothing. Vehicle missing. Phone inactive. Residence empty. Michael closed his eyes briefly. The timing said everything. People disappeared for many reasons. Suspects disappeared for very specific reasons. He ran, Lucas said. Nobody disagreed. Because innocent people rarely vanished the exact morning federal investigators arrived. The room grew darker emotionally. Not because hope was fading. Because the truth was becoming real. Someone had harmed Matilda. Someone had planned it. Someone knew investigators were closing in. And now that person was running. Rachel secured the final evidence container. Then looked toward Michael. There is one more thing. The agent turned. What? The toxicologist glanced toward the pillow. Then toward Matilda. Her expression had become unusually grim. What I found explains the injuries. A pause. But not everything. Emma frowned. What do you mean? Rachel looked back at the pillow. The quantity. The room waited. Rachel's voice lowered. There is far too much material inside. A silence followed. Heavy. Dangerous. What does that mean? Nathan asked. Rachel met his eyes. It means whoever prepared this wanted repeated exposure. Nobody spoke, because everyone understood exactly what she was saying. This was never meant to happen once. It was designed to happen every night, for as long as necessary. And somewhere beyond the hospital walls, Derek Vaughn had disappeared into the shadows, carrying secrets investigators desperately needed. The hunt had officially begun. The atmosphere inside Riverside Regional Medical Center changed completely after Derek Vaughn disappeared. Fear moved faster than official announcements. It spread through hallways, through whispered conversations, through nervous glances exchanged between administrators. People sensed something was wrong long before they understood exactly what. By noon, federal vehicles occupied sections of the hospital parking lot. Uniformed officers stood near entrances. Investigators moved through administrative offices carrying evidence cases and laptops. The hospital continued operating. Patients still needed treatment. Surgeries still happened. Medications still had to be administered. Yet beneath the normal routine, Riverside no longer felt like a hospital. It felt like a crime scene. Inside a temporary command center established in an unused conference room, Michael Donovan stood before a wall covered with photographs, timelines, and personnel records. The investigation was expanding rapidly, much faster than anyone expected. Emma sat nearby reviewing hospital access records while Lucas Reed coordinated interviews with federal agents throughout the building. The conference room itself reflected the speed of the operation. Coffee cups, evidence folders, computer cables, printed reports, investigators walking in and out every few minutes. Controlled chaos. The kind Michael knew well. The kind that usually meant hidden truths were finally beginning to surface. A knock interrupted the room. A young federal analyst entered carrying a tablet. Her name was Sarah Whitlock, 28 years old. Short and slender with curly dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail. Sarah possessed an almost photographic memory and an unusual ability to recognize patterns buried inside enormous quantities of information. People often underestimated her because she appeared younger than her age. They usually regretted it. Sarah handed the tablet to Michael. We found something. Michael immediately focused. What? Camera logs. Emma looked up. The analyst tapped the screen. The missing footage wasn't deleted. The room became silent. Michael frowned. Explain. Sarah pulled a chair closer. The hospital believed the files were erased. They weren't. No. A small smile appeared. The system archived them. Hope surged through Emma. For days, those missing recordings had represented one of the largest obstacles. Now they might become the strongest evidence. Sarah continued. The files were hidden inside a maintenance backup partition. Lucas immediately stepped closer. Can you recover them? I already did. The analyst rotated the tablet. Video footage appeared. Timestamp. Hallway camera. 4th floor. Room 414. The exact location investigators needed. Emma's pulse accelerated. Michael watched carefully. The recording showed Derek Vaughn entering the hallway at 1:17 a.m. Then again on another night. And another. And another. Always after midnight. Always near room 414. Always carrying something. Sometimes a clipboard. Sometimes a linen bag. Sometimes nothing at all. Yet his destination never changed. The evidence was devastating. Not because it proved guilt. Because it destroyed every innocent explanation. Derek's behavior was deliberate. Repeated. Consistent. Planned. Michael looked toward Lucas. Get copies to evidence. Lucas nodded. Already moving. Meanwhile, another team focused on hospital leadership. And what they discovered was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Richard Holloway sat across from 2 federal investigators inside his executive office. For the first time in years, the hospital CO looked uncertain. Not frightened. Not yet. But uncertain. The investigators asked simple questions. When did he learn about Matilda? Who informed him? Why did he personally meet with Emma Carter? Why were camera access restrictions placed on specific recordings? Each answer created additional questions. Richard remained careful, professional, polished. But Michael had seen similar situations many times. People who lied usually feared consequences. People who told partial truths feared exposure. Richard belonged firmly in the second category. At the same time, Patricia Vale underwent questioning in another office. The veteran-charge nurse appeared exhausted. Years older than she had the day before. Federal investigations had a way of stripping away protective illusions. especially from people carrying secrets. Special Agent Dana Mercer conducted the interview. Dana was 43 years old, athletic, direct, and remarkably difficult to intimidate. Her dark hair remained cropped short. A broken nose from an old law enforcement training accident gave her face a permanent look of determination. Unlike many investigators, Dana rarely raised her voice. Silence often worked better. Patricia lasted 42 minutes before breaking. Not completely. Partially. Enough. I didn't know anyone was being hurt. Dana remained calm. What did you know? Patricia stared at the table, then answered. I knew complaints were being buried. The statement changed everything. Dana continued carefully. What complaints? Patient complaints. Whose decision? Patricia hesitated. Too long. Administration. The answer entered the official record, and the federal case immediately expanded. By mid-afternoon, investigators discovered additional incidents. Not identical to Matilda's, but troubling. Several patients had submitted unusual complaints over the previous 2 years. Complaints that disappeared, reports that vanished, documentation that never reached proper review channels. Most involved minor issues, nothing criminal. Yet together they revealed a pattern, a culture. Protect the hospital first. Handle problems quietly. Avoid attention. Michael studied the growing evidence wall. The picture becoming visible disturbed him, because the conspiracy might be larger than Derek Vaughn. Not in terms of direct involvement. In terms of protection, organizations sometimes created conditions that allowed dangerous people to operate. Not intentionally. Through negligence. Through silence. Through misplaced priorities. The distinction mattered legally. It mattered very little to victims. At 3:17 p.m., another call arrived. This one came from Lexington Police. A detective named Harold Green requested immediate contact. Michael accepted. Harold Green was 60 years old, tall and broad with weathered skin and silver stubble covering his jaw. 3 decades of police work had transformed him into a man who trusted instincts nearly as much as evidence. Years earlier, he lost a partner during a fugitive pursuit. Since then, he pursued every lead personally. Some called it stubbornness. Others called it dedication. The detective got directly to the point. We searched Vaughn's apartment. Michael listened. What did you find? Almost nothing. Not good. Professional disappearances usually meant preparation. Harold continued. Clothes gone. Electronics gone. Personal documents gone. Michael already knew what came next. He planned it. Looks that way. The detective paused. There's more. Michael waited. We found recent cash withdrawals. Now things became worse. Because desperate people ran. Prepared people escaped. Prepared suspects stayed hidden longer. Much longer. Meanwhile, Rachel Monroe remained inside a temporary laboratory space established within the hospital. The toxicologist worked nonstop, hour after hour, analyzing, testing, confirming. The fibers recovered from the pillow had become the center of attention. By evening, she finally possessed enough results to make a formal statement. Michael gathered everyone. Emma, Lucas, Nathan, several investigators. Matilda remained absent, recovering, resting, protected. Rachel entered carrying a report. The room immediately fell silent. She placed the document on the table. The fibers are biological. Everyone expected that. Rachel continued. They originated from a marine organism belonging to the Phacelia family. Nathan frowned. I don't know what that means. Rachel looked toward him. Portuguese man o' war. Several people exchanged confused looks. Rachel clarified. A highly venomous marine species. The room became silent again. The words landed heavily. Not fatal in this form. Not immediately. But dangerous. Very dangerous. Rachel pointed toward photographs inside the report. These structures contain microscopic venom delivery components. Emma stared. The images looked almost unreal. Tiny. Complex. Designed by nature. Weaponized by someone else. Rachel continued. Repeated contact would explain everything. The burning. The inflammation. The worsening symptoms. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. His daughter had suffered for days because someone deliberately placed toxic biological material inside her pillow. The cruelty of it felt difficult to comprehend. Not impulsive. Not emotional. Calculated. Patient. Michael spoke quietly. Could it have become worse? Rachel met his eyes. Absolutely. The room grew colder. Because everyone understood the implication. Without intervention, Matilda might have remained exposed indefinitely. Weeks, months, possibly longer. Nathan stood and walked toward the window. For several moments, nobody interrupted him. The retired officer stared across Lexington, then spoke without turning around. This was never revenge. Michael frowned. What do you mean? Nathan remained motionless. Revenge is emotional. Slowly, he turned back toward them. His eyes looked different now. Harder. Focused. Military. The father remained. But something else had returned as well. The commander. This required planning. No one disagreed. Nathan continued. Someone spent years carrying this. The statement lingered. Because it was true. Ordinary anger faded. Ordinary hatred weakened. Only obsession survived nearly a decade. Michael studied him carefully. Nathan wasn't simply grieving anymore. He was analyzing, searching, thinking like an investigator. That might become useful. Or dangerous. Possibly both. As evening approached, the investigation officially received federal case designation. Resources expanded immediately. Additional agents deployed. Search warrants prepared. Financial records subpoenaed. Communication histories requested. The situation had grown far beyond a hospital incident. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond Lexington, Derek Vaughn remained missing. Investigators tracked credit activity, vehicle sightings, cellular records. Nothing. It was as if he vanished. But Michael knew better. Nobody disappeared forever. Not anymore. People always left traces. The only question was how long it would take to find them. Inside room 414, Matilda sat quietly watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. For the first time in a week, the burning sensation had begun fading. Treatment worked. The exposure had stopped. Healing had started. Emma entered carrying dinner. Matilda smiled weakly. You look tired. Emma laughed softly. So do you. The teenager looked toward the window. Are they going to catch him? Emma followed her gaze. Outside, helicopters had long since departed. But the investigation they brought remained, growing larger every hour. I think so. Matilda nodded slowly. For several moments, neither spoke. Then the girl asked the question that had haunted everyone. Why me? Emma didn't answer immediately, because there wasn't an easy answer. Only painful ones. Finally, she sat beside her. Because some people let anger become who they are. Matilda stared at the fading sunlight. The answer wasn't satisfying, but it felt true. Outside the room, federal agents continued building their case. Inside the room, healing had finally begun. And somewhere far away, Derek Vaughn remained free. For now. But the walls were closing in. Slowly. Relentlessly. And the federal government had no intention of stopping until they found him. 3 days after federal authorities officially took control of the investigation, Riverside Regional Medical Center no longer resembled the institution it had been only a week earlier. The polished confidence that once defined the hospital had disappeared. Employees whispered in break rooms. Department heads avoided eye contact. Administrators who had spent years projecting certainty suddenly found themselves answering questions instead of asking them. Fear had become contagious. Not because people knew everything, because they knew enough. Inside the temporary Federal Command Center, Michael Donovan stood before a wall covered in photographs, financial records, personnel files, and timelines. What had begun as a strange complaint from an 18-year-old patient had evolved into one of the most unusual investigations of his career. The evidence no longer pointed toward a single act of revenge. It pointed toward years of concealment, years of ignored warnings, years of people choosing convenience over truth. Michael studied the newest photographs recovered from Derek Vaughn's apartment. Most appeared ordinary. Family pictures, utility bills, employment documents. But one image kept drawing his attention. A photograph taken nearly 8 years earlier. Daniel Vaughn stood outside a courthouse. His face carried the hollow look of a man who had lost everything. Beside him stood a younger Derek, 20 years old, thin, angry, watching his father's humiliation unfold in public. Michael had seen that expression before. Many times. Children often inherited more than their parents' names. Sometimes they inherited grudges. Sometimes they inherited pain. And sometimes they inherited obsessions. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Lucas Reed entered carrying a folder. His normally calm face showed signs of excitement. We found something. Michael immediately turned. What? A storage unit. The federal agent's eyes narrowed. Connected to Derek? Lucas nodded. Paid in cash. When? 6 years ago. Michael's pulse quickened. 6 years. That wasn't preparation. That was planning. The difference mattered. A great deal. What's inside? Lucas smiled grimly. We're about to find out. Across town, federal agents executed a search warrant on a small storage facility hidden between an auto repair shop and a warehouse district on the edge of Lexington. The facility manager appeared confused. Genuinely confused. Special Agent Dana Mercer quickly determined he knew nothing. He had rented units, collected payments, asked no questions. Like most storage managers, Unit 87 sat near the rear of the property. Steel door, heavy padlock, no identifying markings. Federal technicians documented everything before opening it. Then the door rolled upward. Several agents immediately exchanged looks. The unit wasn't empty. Far from it. Inside sat boxes, dozens of them, carefully organized, carefully labeled, carefully preserved. Dana stepped forward. The first box contained newspaper clippings. The second contained military articles. The third contained court records. And every single document involved the same name. Nathan Brooks. For several seconds nobody spoke. The implications settled heavily over the scene. This wasn't revenge born from a recent argument. This wasn't spontaneous. Someone had spent years collecting information, years studying, years planning. Dana carefully lifted a file. Inside were photographs. Hundreds of photographs. Nathan leaving restaurants. Nathan entering stores. Nathan attending community events. Nathan visiting family. The oldest image was nearly 7 years old. The newest was only 3 months old. Dana felt a chill. This wasn't merely surveillance. It was obsession. A dangerous one. Back at Riverside, Nathan Brooks sat alone beside his daughter's bed. For the first time in days, Matilda appeared genuinely better. The redness along her neck had begun fading. The burning sensation no longer woke her every night. Healing had finally started. Yet Nathan struggled to enjoy the progress, because every improvement reminded him how close they had come to disaster. Matilda closed a book and looked toward him. You haven't slept. Nathan smiled weakly. Neither have you. The teenager studied her father. You think this is your fault. The statement landed directly. Nathan looked away. Military officers learned to hide emotions. Daughters learned to see through them. No, it was a lie. Both knew it. Matilda sighed. Dad. Nathan stared at the floor. For several moments he remained silent. Then finally spoke. When I testified against Daniel Vaughn, I thought it was over. His voice sounded older than usual. He stole from taxpayers. He endangered military personnel. He deserved consequences. Matilda listened quietly. Nathan continued. I never imagined someone would carry that anger for years. The teenager reached across the bed and took his hand. You didn't do anything wrong. Nathan looked at her. For the first time in days, tears threatened to appear. Not because of fear, because of relief. His daughter was still here, still alive, still fighting. Many parents never receive that outcome. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Emma entered carrying updated treatment notes. The nurse looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. Her braid had partially come loose. Coffee had become her primary food group. Yet despite everything, she smiled when she saw Matilda. Good news. The teenager immediately sat up. What? The inflammation is improving. Matilda grinned. Amazing what happens when someone stops poisoning my pillow. Nathan laughed unexpectedly. The sound surprised all three of them. For a moment the room felt normal. Almost. Then Emma noticed Michael standing outside the door. His expression immediately erased the brief happiness. Something had happened. Something important. Emma stepped into the hallway. What is it? Michael handed her several photographs. She examined them, then felt her stomach tighten. The storage unit. The surveillance pictures. Years of records. Years of tracking. Oh my God. Michael nodded. Exactly. Emma continued turning pages. Each image felt worse than the last. Nathan shopping. Nathan driving. Nathan walking his dog. Nathan attending public events. Someone had watched him for years. Quietly. Patiently. The nurse looked up. This changes everything. It does. Michael folded his arms. Federal prosecutors agree. Emma understood immediately. The investigation had crossed another line. Attempted harm. Stalking. Retaliation. Conspiracy. Every new discovery strengthened the case and made Derek Vaughn's future considerably darker. Meanwhile, Richard Holloway sat across from attorneys inside a downtown law office. The hospital CEO looked dramatically different than he had a week earlier. More tired, more anxious, older. Public pressure had begun mounting. News organizations wanted interviews. Board members wanted explanations. Federal investigators wanted documents. His attorneys wanted honesty. That last request proved the most difficult. The senior attorney, Benjamin Foster, removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Benjamin was 65 years old, silver-haired, and brutally practical. Decades defending corporations had taught him a simple rule. Small lies became expensive disasters. "What aren't you telling me?" Richard remained silent. Benjamin sighed. "There it is." "What?" "That look." The attorney leaned forward. "Every executive gets it." Richard looked away. Benjamin continued. "The look people make when they know more than they've admitted." The room became quiet. Finally, Richard spoke. "I didn't know someone was being harmed." Benjamin nodded slowly. "That's not what I asked." A long silence followed. Then Richard exhaled. "I knew complaints were disappearing." Benjamin closed his eyes. Not because he was surprised. Because confirmation always hurt more than suspicion. The attorney already understood the consequences. Federal obstruction charges. Civil lawsuits. Board investigations. Career-ending publicity. Possibly worse. Richard stared out the window. For the first time, he began realizing something. The investigation wasn't threatening his position. It was threatening his entire legacy. At 4:16 p.m., another major breakthrough arrived. Sarah Whitlock entered the command center carrying a laptop. The young analyst looked unusually energized. "Good sign. Very good sign. What did you find?" Michael asked. Sarah connected the computer to a display monitor. Financial records. The screen filled with transaction histories. Account numbers. Dates. Transfers. Emma recognized none of it. Michael did. Hidden payments. Layered accounts. Structured transfers. Classic concealment methods. Sarah highlighted several transactions. These payments originated from an account linked to Daniel Vaughn. Lucas stepped closer. And Sarah pointed toward another name. Patricia Vale. The room fell silent. No one spoke. No one needed to. The implication arrived immediately. Not proof, but a lead. A serious one. Emma struggled to process it. Patricia had made mistakes. Ignored warning signs. Protected administrators. But accepting money? That changed everything. Michael remained cautious. "Can we verify?" Sarah nodded. "Working on it." The investigation continued expanding. More interviews. More evidence. More discoveries. Like a crack spreading through glass. And at the center of everything remained one unanswered question. Where was Derek Vaughn? As evening settled over Kentucky, federal agents searched highways, hotels, rental properties, and transportation records. Nothing. No sightings. No confirmed activity. No mistakes. Derek remained invisible. For now. But Michael knew pressure was building. Fugitives rarely escaped because they were smarter than investigators. They escaped because they were lucky. Eventually luck failed. Eventually everyone made mistakes. The question wasn't if Derek would make one. The question was when. Inside room 414, Matilda watched the sunset fade beyond the hospital window. The city lights gradually illuminated the streets below. Traffic moved. People lived their lives, completely unaware of the storm unfolding around her. Emma entered quietly. The teenager smiled. "You know something?" The nurse laughed. "How?" "You get that face." "What face?" "The one where you're trying not to look hopeful." Emma sat beside the bed. For the first time in days, genuine optimism appeared. Not certainty. Not victory. Hope. "We're getting closer." Matilda looked out toward the darkening city. Then back toward Emma. The nurse who had refused to ignore her. The nurse who had listened. The nurse who had changed everything. Neither woman realized it yet. But somewhere beyond Lexington, Derek Vaughn was about to make the first mistake of his life. And when he did, the walls built around him for 8 long years would finally begin collapsing. The mistake happened 41 hours after Derek Vaughn disappeared. For nearly 2 days, he had managed to stay invisible. No credit card activity. No hotel reservations. No cell phone usage. No contact with friends. No contact with family. Nothing. The kind of disappearance investigators hated. And then, like most fugitives eventually do, Derek made one small mistake. A security camera at a gas station outside Bowling Green captured a man purchasing bottled water, energy bars, and prepaid fuel. The image quality was poor. The man wore a baseball cap and sunglasses. To most people, he looked like any traveler passing through Kentucky. To Sarah Whitlock, he looked familiar. The analyst spent 23 minutes comparing facial structure, body proportions, walking posture, and ear shape against known photographs. At 11:42 p.m., she called Michael Donovan. Found him. Michael was already on his feet before she finished explaining. 3 hours later, federal agents surrounded a remote hunting cabin hidden among dense woods near the Tennessee border. The cabin belonged to a former associate of Daniel Vaughn. The location had no internet, no nearby neighbors, no cameras. The perfect place for someone trying to disappear. Special Agent Lucas Reed crouched behind an armored vehicle as dawn slowly approached. Through binoculars, he watched the cabin. One vehicle, one occupant. Lights visible. Movement confirmed. Everything matched. Lucas lowered the binoculars. He's inside. Michael nodded. Years of investigation. Years of planning. Years of obsession. All leading to a small wooden cabin surrounded by trees. Federal agents moved into position. The operation lasted less than 4 minutes. Derek Vaughn surrendered without resistance. No dramatic chase. No shootout. No desperate escape. Just a tired man standing in a doorway with his hands raised. For a brief moment, Michael almost felt disappointed. The man who had caused so much suffering looked ordinary. Small. Exhausted. Human. Evil rarely looked like monsters in movies. It usually looked like ordinary people making terrible choices for far too long. As agents secured him, Derek looked toward Michael. His expression contained no fear, no regret, only bitterness. What took you so long? Michael stared at him. The question revealed everything. Derek hadn't run because he believed he would escape. He ran because he wanted control over how the story ended. Now that control was gone. Back in Lexington, the arrest triggered a chain reaction. Federal prosecutors immediately filed charges. Attempted aggravated assault. Retaliation against a witness's family member. Evidence tampering. Interference with a federal investigation. Stalking. Conspiracy. Additional charges remained under review. The case quickly attracted national attention. News organizations that initially viewed the incident as an unusual hospital story suddenly realized something much larger had occurred. For years, Derek Vaughn had carefully tracked Nathan Brooks. For years, he had nurtured resentment inherited from his father. And eventually that resentment transformed into a calculated attack against an innocent young woman. The evidence recovered from the storage unit destroyed any possibility of misunderstanding. Photographs, surveillance logs, personal notes, timeline documents, records of Nathan's movements. Even investigators who handled violent crimes regularly found the collection disturbing because it demonstrated patience, and patience made obsession dangerous. Meanwhile, Riverside Regional Medical Center faced its own reckoning. The hospital board held an emergency meeting. The session lasted nearly 7 hours. By the end of it, Richard Holloway no longer had a job. Neither did 2 senior administrators connected to evidence suppression. Patricia Vale avoided criminal charges after cooperating fully with federal investigators, but her nursing career effectively ended. When she packed her office for the final time, she moved slowly. Not because she was angry, because she was ashamed. Years earlier, she entered nursing to protect people. Somewhere along the way, she started protecting institutions instead. The difference seemed small at first. Eventually, it became everything. Before leaving the hospital, Patricia requested one final meeting. Not with lawyers, not with administrators, with Emma Carter. The 2 women sat across from each other inside a nearly empty conference room. Patricia looked older than ever. Her gray hair seemed thinner. The confidence that once defined her had disappeared. I should have listened. Emma remained silent. Patricia continued. The first complaint. A pause. The second complaint. Another pause. Matilda. Tears filled her eyes. I knew something felt wrong. Emma studied her carefully. People expected dramatic villains. Reality was usually more complicated. Patricia hadn't created the conspiracy. She had simply looked away. Too many times. Why? Emma asked softly. Patricia laughed bitterly. Because it was easier. The honesty hurt. Because it was true. Most failures weren't caused by evil. They were caused by convenience. Months later, Patricia would repeat that same sentence during federal hearings. And every time she did, the room became silent. Inside room 414, life slowly improved. The burning sensation disappeared completely. The injuries faded. Sleep returned. Normality returned. Most importantly, Confidence returned. For nearly a week, Matilda had questioned her own mind. Now she trusted herself again. Recovery took time. Physical healing always did. Emotional healing took longer. Some nights, she still woke suddenly. Some mornings, she still checked her neck before getting out of bed. Trauma rarely vanished completely. It learned to occupy less space. One afternoon, nearly 3 months after Derek's arrest, Matilda received unexpected visitors. Rachel Monroe arrived first. The toxicologist carried a small gift bag. Inside sat a notebook decorated with ocean waves. Rachel smiled. "Thought you might appreciate reclaiming the ocean." Matilda laughed. The sound surprised both of them. Then Nathan Brooks entered carrying milkshakes. Emma arrived last. The nurse looked uncomfortable seeing everyone gathered. Attention never suited her. It never would. They spent nearly an hour talking. Not about investigations. Not about evidence. Not about federal cases. Just life. Ordinary life. The kind everyone almost lost. After the others left, only Emma and Matilda remained. Sunlight poured through the hospital window. The afternoon felt peaceful. The teenager looked healthier now. Stronger. More confident. Almost like the girl who existed before room 414. Almost. Matilda stared out the window. "You know what I remember most?" Emma smiled. "The pillow." The teenager laughed. "No." "The investigation?" "No." Emma shrugged. "I give up." Matilda looked directly at her. "I remember somebody believing me." The words hit harder than any courtroom verdict. Harder than any news story. Harder than any award. Because they revealed the true heart of everything that happened. Not the federal case. Not the arrest. Not the conspiracy. Belief. One person choosing to listen. One person refusing to dismiss a frightened girl. Emma felt emotion rise unexpectedly. She looked away briefly. "You were telling the truth." "Nobody thought so." "You did." The room became quiet. Outside, Lexington continued moving through another ordinary afternoon. Cars passed. People worked. Children attended school. Life continued. Emma smiled softly. "I wasn't trying to be a hero." Matilda nodded. "I know." The nurse laughed. "I was honestly just being stubborn." "Good." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Good." The teenager smiled. "Sometimes stubborn people save lives." For a moment, neither spoke. Then they both laughed. Months later, Derek Vaughn accepted a plea agreement that guaranteed decades in federal prison. The evidence against him had become overwhelming. The storage unit, the surveillance records, the pillow, the biological material, the witness testimony. The case ended exactly the way Michael Donovan predicted. Not with drama, with evidence. The hospital implemented sweeping reforms. Complaint procedures changed. Reporting systems improved. Independent oversight increased. Not because institutions suddenly became perfect, because enough people finally understood the cost of ignoring warning signs. On a cool autumn morning, nearly 6 months after everything began, Matilda stood outside Riverside Regional Medical Center for the final time. Discharge paperwork rested in her hands. The sky above Lexington was bright blue. No rain. No storms. Just sunlight. Nathan loaded bags into the car. Rachel had already called to congratulate her. Michael remained busy with another investigation somewhere else. Emma stood beside the entrance. Neither woman seemed eager to say goodbye. Finally, Matilda stepped forward, then hugged her, tightly, unexpectedly. Neither spoke for several seconds. When they finally separated, tears filled Matilda's eyes. "I'll never forget you." Emma smiled, neither dramatic nor emotional, just honest. "You won't have to." Matilda laughed through tears, then looked toward her father waiting by the car. A future existed again. College, friends, dreams, poetry notebooks, ordinary things, beautiful things. Before leaving, she turned back one final time. Emma still stood in front of the hospital. The same nurse who had noticed a pattern everyone else ignored. The same nurse who refused to stop asking questions. The same nurse who changed everything simply because she chose not to look away. Matilda raised a hand. Emma waved back. Then the car pulled away. Watching it disappear, Emma felt no pride, no sense of victory, only gratitude, because she understood something most people never did. The world rarely changes because powerful people decide to do the right thing. More often, it changes because one ordinary person refuses to ignore the truth. And sometimes, that is enough to save a life. Sometimes God's greatest miracles do not arrive with thunder from heaven or signs written across the sky. Sometimes they arrive through ordinary people who choose to listen when everyone else dismisses, who choose courage when silence would be easier, and who choose truth when looking away would be more comfortable. Emma Carter never set out to become a hero. She never wanted recognition, awards, or attention. She simply refused to ignore a frightened young woman who kept saying something was wrong. What began as a single complaint about a pillow became the uncovering of a hidden truth, the exposure of a dangerous obsession, and the rescue of a young life that might otherwise have been lost. In our daily lives, most of us will never find ourselves at the center of a federal investigation or uncover a years-long conspiracy. But every day we face smaller choices that matter just as much. We choose whether to listen when someone is hurting. We choose whether to speak up when something feels wrong. We choose whether to stand for the truth when everyone else has already made up their minds. This story reminds us that God often works through ordinary people. He uses compassion, integrity, and perseverance to bring light into places where darkness has been hiding for far too long. Sometimes the miracle is not that God changes the situation instantly. Sometimes the miracle is that He places the right person in the right place at the right moment and gives them the courage to act. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need encouragement today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from and what lesson stayed with you the most. And if you enjoy stories of faith, hope, courage, and justice, don't forget to subscribe and join our growing community. May God bless you and your family with peace in difficult times, wisdom when facing important decisions, strength when life feels heavy, and hope when the path ahead seems uncertain. May His protection be over your home, and may His grace guide your steps each day. Amen.